This is Studio 809.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast. I am your host, Hiking Bob Falcone. You can find me on my website at hikingbob.com, which has links to my social media, my columns, the Colorado Springs Independent, soon to become, or about to become, or will become, 6035 Media, and they're conglomerating all their various publications into one. My column will be back this weekend.
Oh, good.
So I was told that basically enough on the vacation, write a column. So I will be doing it. So I will have a column this weekend. Also, my photography website, and you can also contact me through there. There's a little link to email me or sign up for my newsletter. There's two different things, but you can do that. And it's really good to hear from you because we get listener questions, one of which we're going to address today, a question that a listener asked us. We're going to address that today. So always send us an email and say hi, and suggestions, comments, anything you want. We'd love to hear from you here. And you can also DM me or Kevin, and we'll talk to Kevin here in just a second. You DM us on our social media. Sometimes it takes me a while to catch up with some of that, but the two of us have Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And Kevin, also, you have a TikTok account.
Yes, I do.
Okay, which I really hope you don't use. The Chinese will see what you do if you send Kevin a message on TikTok. Anyway, with me today, as you heard, is my co-host Kevin Wild Westendorf.
Hey, everyone. Kevin Wild Westendorf here. You can find me on my website at wildwestendorf.com, and same on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter at Wild Westendorf.
Cool. Kevin, thanks for being here. Good to have you back. And, we had you back last week after we were gone for a while, and I was gone and you were gone, and we were doing the Give campaign.
Oh, yeah.
And that sounds like it went really well, and I'm hoping that the organizations we had on here, and I wish I could get more of them on here, but there's only so many weeks of that campaign, and there's more weeks than there are organizations. Or there's more organizations than there are weeks, so I can only get so many in, but I hope they all did well on the campaign and made lots of money from all the generous people in the Pikes Peak region who donate to them. So hopefully that works out well. We're in the middle of a slight warming trend, although by the time this airs, there may be a little rain coming, but there's going to be a lot of snow in the high country, not much predicted for here. But it's winter. I mean, it's actually acting like it's winter.
Which is nice.
The bad part of that, though, is muddy trails. And I've encountered a number of them in the last couple of days, and they're a mess. So I'm just going to touch real quickly on mud and trails. The best thing to do, of course, if the trails are muddy, is stay off the trails. That's hard for you to do, me to do, a lot of people do. We have to be
very hard, yeah.
So if you encounter a muddy trail, you don't go around it, just go down the middle of it. You're going to get muddy. If you don't like getting muddy, then stay home or go on a paved trail, which we like to call a sidewalk, and do something like that. But there are muddy trails. I have a YouTube video that I shot over the weekend, and I'll include a link to that in the show notes. If you are a subscriber to my newsletter, you've got a link to that. If you follow me on my Facebook account, you also saw it, but I'll also include a link to that here. But basically, we don't want people to do on muddy trails is to go around them, because then that widens the trail. It causes more damage to the surrounding area, and we generally don't like to see that. So stay on the trail, or if you don't like getting muddy, or if you got pants so you don't want to get muddy, you got boots you don't want to get muddy, you may just have to stay home for a while and let things dry out. So, On the other hand, if it's snowy, then of course that actually snow causes the least amount of damage. It's like a buffer between you and the ground.
That's right.
So if it's snowy, that's better. But also be careful that snow melts and then it freezes. It turns to ice and it gets slippery. All kinds of things. It's an adventure. You have to just look at this. If it was easy, everybody would, it's Colorado. Everybody does it anyway. So I guess it can't be too bad. So just a note, real quick, I want to talk about dealing with the muddy trails and stuff like that. Kevin, we got a couple of topics I want to talk about. Real quick, by the time this airs, the city council here in Colorado Springs will have, I don't know if they'll final approve it, but they will have looked at the proposed ballot language for the April election to extend the TOPS tax. And for those of you not familiar, the TOPS tax is 1 cent on every $10 of purchases made either online or in the city limits of Colorado Springs. So if you're subject to a Colorado Springs city sales tax, you get this. And it goes to fund the TOPS program, which has existed for last year was the 25th anniversary of it. And it is responsible for purchasing places like Red Rock Canyon Open Space, where I was on Monday.
Yep.
Encountered a lot of mud. Cheyenne Mountain State Park, where I was on Saturday. A lot of that was purchased with TOPS money and is managed by the state parks. It has purchased the Corral Bluffs, which is out on the eastern side of the city. It has purchased a lot of land. Half of Ute Valley Park was purchased with TOPS funds. So it is a very important thing. It has bought 7,200 acres of land in the last 25 years, land that may have gone to become a shopping center or 1,000 homes. It's not designed to be, let me make it clear, it's not designed to be an anti-development thing. We're not out to steal stuff from developers, and people who sell property to the city through the TOPS program have to be willing buyers. They're not taking it. We're not using eminent domain.
Yeah.
If they're not willing to sell it, then we don't buy it. If they want more than fair market value, we don't buy it. There's very strict restrictions built into this program. But it has bought a lot of land in places that could have been developed. Red Rock Canyon Open Space, one of the most popular open spaces in the entire region, was a ranch and at one time a quarry and at one time a landfill. It was slated to become a 27-hole golf course, a couple thousand houses, and a shopping center.
Thank goodness it didn't.
Yeah, imagine what that would be like if that didn't happen right up against the little town of Manitou Springs. It would have been right in their back door. It would have been, you can argue it would have been good for the city, but obviously that area is a prime recreation area.
Yep.
It opens up into the national forest. Obviously, is a good thing. So that is coming up for its final action, I would say. I think City Council is actually going to vote on it finally at the next City Council meeting, and then when they finally approve the language and adopt it, and we've got language that everybody seems to like. It's some minor little tweaks to it, but for the most part, it's not an increase. We're not asking for any more money. It's still going to be 1 cent on every $10. Then it'll be on the April election. The April election, we're also voting for a new mayor.
Oh, that's right.
Because
Yeah.
Mayor Suthers' term limit out. We're voting for at least 3, maybe 4 city council people.
Okay. Yep.
Because our city council members at large are up for re-election and they're term limited out, so they're out. So not up for re-election, they're term limited. They have to go. And I think at least one of the district seats is also coming up to fill a vacancy. So there's a lot going on in the April election, and it's kind of weird. Colorado Springs has this midterm. Then not only is it midterm, but it's in April instead of November kind of election.
Yeah.
But anyway, if you're here in Colorado Springs, there's coming up. You're going to see a lot of press on this coming up, and probably pretty soon. Even by the time you hear this podcast, there may already be some media coverage on the ballot language. But it's an exciting time. I am privileged to chair the TOPS committee for the city, and it's a committee that's a subset of the Parks Advisory Board, both of which are volunteer-led. And the ordinance requires that there be a TOPS working committee to be the citizen advisors on how the program is run and purchases that are made. And I'll give everybody just a really quick, really short idea how the program is run. Somebody can fill out an application asking for a specific piece of property to be considered for purchase by the city under the TOPS tax. When that happens, the city staff has a particular set of requirements that they have to look at, whether it fits the bill, whether it's something we would even consider. And then they bring it to the TOPS working committee if they think it does fit the bill. And then we look at it. One of the requirements is you cannot vote on a purchase unless you go visit the property. So you're mandated to go out and visit the property. So we have to go and set foot on every piece of property that's out there that we're considering buying. And then we look at it and we look at the criteria. Then we kind of just, for me, it's touchy-feely kind of thing. Does this make a sense? Is it a place that we can enjoy? Is it a place that we can put trails in? Is it a place that would make sense as an open space? Does it benefit the public? Besides and that's on top of the criteria that's set forth. That's the kind of what I'm looking at, gut reaction. Does this make sense? And then when that happens, the TOPS working committee makes a recommendation, yes or no, to buy it. We're informed of how much the asking price is, and there's evaluations done to determine if that's actually fair market value. If the people want more than fair market value, then we're not even allowed to move. I mean, it's
Okay.
The ordinance says we can't do it. We make a recommendation to the Park Advisory Board. So there's 9 people on the TOPS working committee, 9 more citizen volunteers on the Parks Advisory Board. They have to look at the criteria. They look at our recommendation. They make their own judgment. If they believe it's a good idea to purchase the land, and we have the money to do it, and we've never not had the money to buy anything that was put forth to us. We bring it to city council because city council, the elected officials, they're the only ones who can really decide whether to spend taxpayer money, and then they're presented with everything, and they make the final say. Typically, by the time it's gone through pretty rigorous review, they say yes to it. I don't think they've ever said no. And that tells you how much they trust the Park Advisory Board and the Tops Working Committee and how well those committees are constructed. I mean, I just interviewed in the fall some people to fill vacancies on the Tops Working Committee, and I was pretty critical about whether they, I asked them to tell me what they thought the committee was. And if they couldn't even answer what the TOPS program was, then they obviously hadn't done their homework. I don't expect you to know the fine details of everything because you learn it as you go, but you at least got to have an idea. And we had really great candidates the last time. So we picked a member and a couple of alternates, and they're all great. The alternates are there if somebody has to leave the committee. They get, they become full voting members and stuff. So it's a really cool program. Parks Advisory Board, the same way. So that's what the top program is. That's be coming up. And the reason why it's coming up is because the program runs out in 2025. So we have to renew it. And we're going to be asking for a 20-year renewal. Last time we asked for it, we got a 20-year renewal of it.
Oh, okay.
So it's been renewed before. There's a couple of minor changes to it because the money is divided up into different categories. It's spent for different things. It's mandated in the ballot language how the money is spent. So one of them is typically the money could only have been spent on TOPS purchase property. So you couldn't use the money on any other park. We've kind of changed that a little bit over the years by voter approval. Since this is a voter initiative, every change has to be done by the voters.
Makes sense.
These things have always, and I love that about it. You just can't just willy-nilly change things. So we're asking that money can be spent on any park. And the reason why we have that is like Ute Valley Park is what I call a legacy park. So it's been a park for many, many years. But half of it, that park was extended a couple years ago, if you recall, doubled in size pretty close. And that was bought with TOPS money. So what happens is half the park is managed by funds raised from the TOPS tax. The other half is not. It's raised by what we call general funds, just tax collected on property tax and stuff like that. So they're managed almost like two different parks, but they're one park.
Okay.
And it's kind of confusing. So
I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of weird. So if you see signs like in one half of the park look different than signs in the other half of the park, it's because they're managed and funded differently. So we're looking to fix that. And there's not many parks that are like that. Austin Bluffs, Open Space, and Pulpit Rock, and those is actually checkerboard of different funding things, trying to make all that. So one area that everybody goes to, and for the public, all they care about is it's one area. They don't care what's what. That's fine. They shouldn't have to. But they're all funded equally so that we don't have this disparity. Well, that half of the park is funded with this money and they don't have as much, and this park is funded with this half is funded with that money, and there's more of that, so that part looks better than this part. It's kind of silly. It's the law of unintended consequences. When they created this thing 25 years ago, nobody really saw all that coming up. And then that's why you have it where we can ask the voters to change it. And then the other part of it is in the open space category, which is where the money is used for acquisition. We have a thing in there that was requested by some outdoor advocates that we guarantee that 75% of the money in that category can only be spent to acquisition. Okay. Now it sounds like you're kind of hamstringing things, but actually you're not, because in the last 10 years, I think it is, we've spent more than 80% of that money solely on acquisition. So we're fine with that, and everybody is fine with both of these things, and I think it's got a good chance of approval. Like I said, we're not asking for an increase. It's money people have been paying. It's a mere penny on every $10. It's not like a lot of money. We were asked about increasing it, but as general sales tax revenue is increased, the amount of money going into the fund is increased. So there's really no need to ask for more money, a higher sales tax, because we're actually it's making more money just by virtue of more sales. And some of that came from taxing online purchases. So now when you purchase something on Amazon, for example, you pay a sales tax. That wasn't always there before. So a lot of these things it's getting more money without changing anything. And I said, as my role there, I said, I don't see the need to ask for more money just for the purpose of asking for money. We're accomplishing everything we want with the money we're collecting.
Yeah.
Now, if in a couple of years sales tax revenue drops, or inflation keeps eating at things, we may have to go after the voters and ask for more money. But in the short term, it's like we don't need it. So there's no point in asking for more just for the purpose of saying we want more money. It's like, I'm a taxpayer too, besides sitting on this committee. I'm a taxpayer. This is my money too. So anyway, that's coming up. I hope everybody votes yes on that in April. I think it's kind of a no-brainer. I can't see why anybody look at all this land that we have here and think about not having that.
Oh, yeah. Like, we are extremely blessed and lucky that the people a few decades back had the forethought to install this program.
Stratton Open Space was the first piece of land purchased under that program.
Oh, okay.
And obviously it's a popular place, and it's adjacent to North Cheyenne Canyon Park, which has existed for 100 and some odd years. So it's been a very popular program. I'm privileged to sit on that committee and chair it, and I have about a year and a half to go. Volunteers on these committees, believe it or not, on these boards are term limited, just like elected officials are. So I have to leave after about a year and a half. But it's been a privilege to sit on that board, on that committee, and really get an inside look about how things are managed and stuff like that. So I'm excited about this happening. We announced at the last meeting that there's a 1,000-acre parcel on the east side of town that we're looking at purchasing. We're getting it for a very good price. Pretty excited about that. And this is the kind of things that this program does. Without this, you would have a lot of open space that wouldn't be open. It would just be concrete. Nobody came here. Nobody lives here because that's what they want. They want it because they want the open spaces and the trails and the parks and things like that. So for those of you who live here in Colorado Springs, watch the news, watch your ballot when it comes out. This will be in April. And vote yes, please.
Please, yes. And thank you, Bob, for being on the board, for devoting so much of your time to it too. I'm sure thousands of other people are thankful for it, even if they're not really aware of how the process goes. Like every weekend, there's thousands of people who enjoy these parks and open spaces.
Thank you, and I'm like I said, it's a privilege for me to be able to do that. When I was in Red Rock Canyon on Monday, I wanted to stop people and say, "Do you know how this was acquired? Do you know how you ended up being able to enjoy this beautiful open space?" But that would just seem weird if I stopped people and asked them that, so I didn't do that. But it'd be good to just talk to people and help them understand how this got. And of course, that'll be part of the PR for the election and stuff like that. I talked to some people over the weekend, and they're like excited about this. I'm real solid open space advocates who go back many years here, and they're very excited about it too. So it looks like we have a good issue, and I think people will be in favor of it. They appreciate people who live here. Most of them are here because this is what, at least partially, this is what they want to do. They may be here for jobs and they may be here for military, but a lot of people come back when they have to leave because they enjoyed our open spaces and our parks.
And I've got a ton of friends that when I've gone on a hike with them in Red Rock Canyon open space, I'll tell them this almost became a fancy neighborhood and a golf course, and they're just shocked and just even more thankful that we didn't turn such a gorgeous place into a neighborhood.
A very dense neighborhood.
Yeah.
Like that. So anyway, so that's the scoop with that. So I know it's a long-winded kind of a piece there, but I wanted to talk about that. The work to get a ballot language has been back and forth for many, many months. I don't want to say I've been knee-deep into it, but I've had some input on that. There's other people who spend a lot more time than I did on it, more the politically minded people than I am. But everybody's done great work and really has been in favor of getting this going. And it's vitally important, I think, to the city and to protecting our basically protecting our way of life here. So, Kevin, we've been talking about this new feature on the iPhone 14 that has satellite communications built into it, and how exciting that is. I've written a couple pieces in my column about it. You and I have talked about it. Of course, we've also talked about the law of unintended consequences, which, when somebody falls down and goes boom while skiing, it calls 911 even if they don't need help, and there's a flaw in that they don't have enough time, or they may not hear the alert on their phone. They don't have enough time to get to it because it's in their coat to cancel that. A lot of 911 calls. Apple should have that fixed hopefully pretty soon. That's not available on Google or Android phones, but now it will be. Qualcomm, which is a company that makes the chips that run almost all the Android phones, has announced that there will have a chip that will have satellite communications built into it. So you can expect to see that on Android phones coming up. They said it will be this year, 2023.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm going to bet it's probably going to be higher end, more expensive phones, but it will be coming out to those phones. So if you've got an Android phone and you want to have that satellite communication, don't go to the dark side and buy an iPhone. I don't know. I've always been an Android user, but they will be getting it to the Android phone sometime in the near future. So it's pretty cool that they figured out how to do this. I just think it's remarkable that in a little phone you can have a satellite.
Oh, yeah, it's awesome.
And it's not going to be like satellite phone calls. It's going to be texting and stuff like that, bare minimum stuff, but enough to help you. I still think a personal locator beacon is the best option for people who hike a lot. Yes. But it's an expense. So if you don't want to spend that, but you're out to get a new phone, the phone is a pretty good way to go. There are some features in personal locator beacons that are not in these sat phones. They are not actually a beacon that anybody could follow, for example. So like my personal locator beacon, what you have, actually has a transmitter that's constantly sending a signal. So search and rescue teams or radio direction finding equipment can actually hone in on where you're at very precisely. These are features that are not built into these phones. They're basically, here are your coordinates, hopefully they're correct, and they're not being thrown off by atmosphere or something like that, and a message saying you need help. So these are a good device. I'm not poo-pooing them. I think they're a great device. The technology is awesome. But if you really spend time, especially in the backcountry, I still think a personal locator beacon is the way to go. But if maybe you're a more casual user, and you're going to get a new phone, these phones are obviously a big advantage. So they're a good way to go. And
an update on the story that we talked about with this feature last week was about a family in a car that drove off the highway, and they were rescued because the phone was able to use the SOS feature. It turns out the police arrested the driver, the man of the family, because they actually figured out or suspect him of intentionally driving the car off the highway, which is terrifying. But
how evil! That's the best word I could find for that. Yeah, and that's exactly right. But the 911, the SOS communications in their phone, alerted the authorities to that. So yeah, pretty odd thing. Kind of technology may have thwarted a homicide attempt.
Because him and his family survived, but if the iPhone didn't automatically call 911, he could have just left the car there and stuff. I mean, so
he could have climbed out, left everybody there, and nobody would have known the wiser till it was too late. So it has its advantages. It works really well. I just think, like I said, a beacon is still better for a number of technological reasons. The other part, of course, is battery life and things like that you have to consider. But if you're not out there a lot and you're a more casual user, then obviously these new features built into phones are obviously an advantage. So they're a good thing to have. So I think it's pretty cool. Like I said, I'm a tech, you know me, I'm a tech nerd anyway. So I've got all this kind of technological stuff. So I kind of like this. But it's pretty interesting out there. We talked about answering listener questions. Yep. And we answered a bunch of them right before the Give campaign, and we devoted almost all of our podcasts for the last couple of months were dedicated to Give campaign, which has been fine. But I wanted to catch up on some of those. And one of the questions we were asked by a listener was they wanted to know what the symptoms were of altitude sickness, because we've talked about that. People come here and they don't acclimate, then they try to climb a 14er, and they were in, you were in Kansas at sea level on Monday and Wednesday. Yep. Well, Tuesday you're trying to climb Pikes Peak, and you don't realize it's 12 plus miles one way, and it's 8,000 feet of elevation gain, and you're starting 6,000 feet higher than where you live to begin with, kind of a thing. So I looked it up. And here's the answer. So first off, I can't give you just a simple answer because that would be too simple. But it's altitude sickness is sometimes called, this is from WebMD, which is one of the sources I do trust because they have generally pretty good information. Sometimes called mountain sickness, and it's a group of symptoms that can strike if you walk or climb to a higher elevation too quickly. We shouldn't call it altitude. It's actually elevation. Altitude is above the ground in the air. Elevation is just how high the ground is above sea level. That makes sense.
Yep.
So the pressure of the air that surrounds you is called barometric or atmospheric pressure. When you go to higher altitude, the pressure drops and there's less oxygen available. For example, it's generally accepted that there's 21% of oxygen in the air, in our atmosphere.
Yeah.
But where we're at here, there's actually about 19%. So it's a little lower. Doesn't seem like a lot, but it can make a big difference. So anytime you go above 8,000 feet, you can be at risk for altitude sickness, elevation sickness, mountain sickness, they call it. I would say, though, that I have seen people have some effects of it at our elevations here at 6,000 feet.
Oh, yeah.
Where we're at. But technically, I guess, by the book, it's 8,000 feet. And when you're here, it takes next to nothing to hit 8,000 feet. You hit 8,000 feet really quickly when you go west out of here.
Yeah, I've got a friend a few years back who came out here to spend a week here, and he ended up just being on the couch the entire week because he was so sick. And we never drove up Pikes Peak or did any hiking. I just felt really bad for him.
Yeah. Oh, I get it. One of the things that they note in here is like who can get altitude sickness, and it actually can be anybody. I mean, now those of us who live here, we get acclimated to it. Our bodies adjust to it, but actually, anybody can get altitude sickness. And I will tell you that times I've been up on Pikes Peak, sometimes I'll go up there and I'll feel fine, maybe just a little tired, a little woozy because there's really not much oxygen at 14,000 feet. But there have been sometimes I've been up to Pikes Peak and just gotten sick. I mean, go to the bathroom and puke because I just don't feel good. So it does say on here, no matter how fit, young, or healthy, even Olympic athletes can get altitude sickness. In fact, being physically active at high elevation makes you more likely to get it because there's less oxygen, you're breathing more, your body needs more oxygen, and there's just not more oxygen up there. So that makes a lot of sense. Your chance of getting altitude sickness depends on a few things: how quickly you move to higher elevation, how high up you go, the altitude where you sleep, and other factors. So we start off here at around 6,000 feet. Where we're sitting right now, we're at 6,350. So, when you're used to that, you sleep at that elevation, then obviously you're a little better shape than somebody who's at sea level or 1,000 feet, for example, and then they go up from there. Your risk also depends on where you live and the altitude there, your age. Young people are more likely to get it, and whether you've had altitude sickness before. Certain illnesses like diabetes or lung cancer doesn't automatically make you likely to develop, which is interesting. People have certain diseases, sickle cell anemia, COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, unstable angina, which is basically chest pain, a heart problem. High-risk pregnancy, height failure, cystic fibrosis are less likely to be able to tolerate the change in altitude. So are people who have had recent heart attacks or strokes. I will tell you that in the summer months, our local medical helicopters make a couple trips a week to the summit of Pikes Peak to pull people off of there who are not just sick, but they are really having serious issues. They'll fly the helicopters up there. So, and that happens a couple times a week. I hear them on the scanner, and they're heading up there. So there's three types of altitude sickness. There's acute mountain sickness, the mildest form, very common. Symptoms can feel like a hangover, dizziness, headache, muscle aches, nausea. I think most of us who've been here, who have been up to like the summit of Pikes Peak, 14,115 feet, have probably experienced that. There's high altitude pulmonary edema. This is a buildup of fluid in the lungs. It can be very dangerous, even life-threatening. When you hear the word edema, that's a fancy medical word for fluid buildup.
Okay.
So if you hear that, that's generally not a good thing. This is the most common cause of death from altitude sickness. Your lungs fill up with fluid, and you basically drown in your own...
I had no idea.
Yeah.
That was the thing. That's scary.
Yeah, very scary. Then there's high-altitude cerebral edema. There's that word edema again. The cerebral brain in your brain is the most severe form of altitude sickness. Happens when there's fluid in the brain. It is life-threatening, and you need to seek medical attention right away. That is... Anytime you have anything going on in your skull like that, And what happens is you probably heard about people having like closed head injuries.
Yep.
And what happens is our skull is very thick bones, and you have an injury, it causes the brain like a bruise. So your bruise is an accumulation of fluid. When that fluid it builds up in your skull, and your skull is very thick, so it can't expand. It squeezes the brain.
Yep.
And it causes the brain to be squished, and which is not good for your brain. So this is kind of what they're talking about with this cerebral. All my EMT skills for 40 years are coming back.
Yeah, my friend's dad actually had to get emergency brain surgery over Thanksgiving, because about a month beforehand he had hit his head on the job. Thought he was fine, but over the weeks he's just started like having a hard time, like finding words to say. He would go to grab for something and he couldn't really grab stuff, and he just started to act weird too. So they took him to the ER and they did all the tests, and it turned out he had a very, very slow brain bleed. Mm-hmm. And if he had waited another week, he'd be gone. Like, it's terrifying.
And the cure for that, and I'm sure they did it with him, is they actually take a drill.
Yep.
And they drill a hole in the skull to let that fluid out.
He showed me the pictures, and I was like, Bill, I didn't ask to see the photos, because he's like, oh, I got them on my phone. I was like, thanks, Bill.
When your doctor's instruments are a Black & Decker, it's probably something to be worried about. But that's how they relieve it. I mean, that's the emergency fix for it. Then obviously they go in and try to fix the problem. But that's to relieve that pressure that builds up. So these are the kind of the different things. Now, most people are going to get the altitude mountain sickness. The acute mountain sickness, you're just going to feel kind of crappy. You're going to feel sick. You're going to feel like you got a headache. You're nauseous. You're a little woozy. So there are the symptoms: headache, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, fatigue, and loss of energy. You're going to be tired. You're at high elevations. Shortness of breath, problems with sleep, loss of appetite. Some of these are long-term things. You're going to feel, and I can tell you from experience, you're going to feel the headache, dizziness, nausea, and maybe the vomiting pretty quickly. That's going to happen while you're there. Some things may happen later. Symptoms usually come on within 12 to 24 hours of reaching a higher elevation. Get better within a day or two as your body adjusts to the change in altitude. So the people who email me and they email you and they say, I'm flying out there, can I go to Pikes Peak? Can I climb up Pikes Peak? And we usually tell them, wait a couple of days.
Yeah.
This is why we're telling you to do that. And to be honest with you, I will, unless you're really super fit, and then as we heard, that doesn't even matter. I really, that's not even enough time. You really need some time to adjust. Now, I get it. You're coming out here on vacation. You don't have 2 weeks to hang around and get used to it. But flying out here one day and climbing the next day is a recipe to get sick. And the very least is if you're coming out here, and I will say this to people who are listening to this and they're thinking about coming out here and climbing on one of our 14ers this summer, build in some time in your trip so you have a couple of days to acclimate. Build it into your trip. Don't expect to come out here, fly into Colorado Springs Airport on Monday, and be hiking up Pikes Peak on Tuesday because you're going to be carried out of there on a helicopter by Tuesday afternoon. And I will guarantee you're not going to like that helicopter rescue bill because it's in the tens of thousands of dollars. If you have a more moderate case of altitude sickness, your symptoms might feel more intense and not improve with over-the-counter medications. Instead of feeling better as time goes on, you'll start to feel worse. You'll have shortness of breath and fatigue. You may also have, and this is where things start to get serious, loss of coordination and trouble walking, severe headache that doesn't get better, tightening in your chest, severe form of altitude sickness, like we talked about, pulmonary edema or cerebral edema. You're going to have confusion, shortness of breath even when you're not moving. You're not going to be able to walk. A cough that produces a white or pinky frothy substance. I will tell you that when I was an EMT and a firefighter, and we saw somebody with that, they were in really serious trouble.
Oh, okay.
This was get them to the hospital like yesterday. And, of course, the worst thing is a coma, which your friend was probably headed for. Your friend's dad was probably headed for. Mm-hmm. And once you get to that point, the prognosis is not good. I will tell you that. So who gets it? Anybody can get it. We kind of talked about that. How is it treated? If you get a headache and one other symptom, within a day or two of changing your elevation, you might have altitude sickness. For mild symptoms, you can try staying at your current altitude, see if your body adjusts. Rest, keep warm, have plenty of liquids. Liquids are real important. We go back to, we've always talked about hydration. How much do we mention hydration on here? We talk about that a lot. Don't go any higher until your symptoms are completely gone. If you feel crappy, this is not the time to go hiking up a big 10, 12, 13, 14,000 foot mountain. It's just not a good idea. Treatment of it, if you get a headache, we talked about that. If the symptoms are severe or if mild symptoms don't go away in a couple of days, you need to get to a lower elevation as quickly as possible. Don't exert, get medical help. Your doctor might listen to your chest or take an x-ray or scan your brain to look for fluid. And they go into a little more detail about steroids that are used to treat the cerebral edema. If you have pulmonary edema, supplemental oxygen and you may need medications, as well as moving to a lower altitude. How can it be prevented? We've kind of mentioned some of this. You lower your chance through acclimatization. That means you can get your body slowly used to the changes in air pressure to travel to higher elevations. You'll want to climb to higher elevations, altitudes gradually. They use elevations and altitudes interchangeably. I kind of wish they didn't in this. Going slowly helps your lung get more air. Start your journey below 10,000 feet. If you have to fly or drive somewhere that's higher up, stop at one destination that's lower for at least a full day before going any higher. If you fly or drive somewhere and can't spend time at lower elevations along the way, there are some drugs that can help speed up acclimatization. Talk to your doctor. If you walk, hike, or climb over 10,000 feet, only go an additional 1,000 feet per day. For every 3,000 feet you climb, rest at least a day at that height. Climb high and sleep low. So I guess talking about going back down. Of course, that's kind of hard to do. Here's the hydration thing. 3 to 4 quarts of water every day. And make sure 70% of your calories are coming from carbs. This is not the time to be on the Atkins diet.
Yeah.
You need those carbs. Obviously, don't use tobacco, alcohol, medications such as sleeping pills, especially for the first 48 hours. Caffeine is okay if you normally drink it. Do not exercise vigorously for the first 48 hours. You're already having issues. Don't make it worse. It's a good excuse not to go to the gym.
Yeah.
Know how to identify the first symptoms of altitude sickness. Move to a lower elevation right away if you start to have these symptoms. This is also why it's good to go hiking with somebody else so that you can watch the other person.
Yeah,
and say, hey, maybe we need to take a break. Maybe you need to drink water. Maybe you need to eat something. Maybe we need to go back down. Maybe we need to see a doctor. All those things come into play. So those are the signs and symptoms. Typically what I've seen and what I've personally experienced, I think everybody here has experienced this at one time or another.
I don't think I have yet.
Really? But you're young and healthy.
Because I've thought about it and I was like, there was one time I did get sick on the trail, but I had barely started, and it was the food that I ate that morning because it was sudden. It wasn't like, oh, I'm starting to feel bad or whatever. I canceled the hike and I went back, but
which is a smart move.
Yeah, because it was a huge hike, and so if I'm already getting sick and stuff, like I'm not going to risk that, because that's a good way to get dehydrated, which can lead to getting more sick at the altitude. But yeah, I don't think I've gotten specifically altitude sickness yet.
Never felt a little woozy or kind of like out of breath or something?
I felt funny on top of Pikes Peak the first time I was up there one time, but it was more like loopy, like, ooh, there's no air up here and stuff. But
yeah, I wouldn't call that altitude sickness, but that's an effect of the altitude.
Okay, yeah.
So you were kind of like touching one of these symptoms. So,
okay.
So you were kind of there. I mean, you weren't sick, obviously, but yeah, the best thing to do is just get back down. And that's the thing with driving or taking the train up Pikes Peak is you're changing altitude really fast.
Yep.
If you climb up Pikes Peak, and especially if it's your first time, I always recommend people spend the night at bar camp. It's about halfway up. I always recommend it for first timers. Don't try to do this thing all one day. Go to bar camp, spend the night there, go up the next day, come back down, spend the night at bar camp, and then come the rest of the way down, because coming down isn't any better than going up. It's actually, in some ways, it's worse. So in any case, these are the symptoms. And thank you for the listener for asking us.
Yeah, thank you.
There's a whole lot more to this than I knew, and I was an EMT for a long time, but,
And I know a few of my friends who have gotten sick on the mountains. It was just they either didn't eat that morning or it's a lack of water. So these are friends who are very fit in shape, but that doesn't matter if you don't take into account on these other factors too.
Not eating is not a good idea.
It's a terrible idea.
We all try to diet and everything like that. You could save the fasting or whatever you want to call it, or if you're on a calorie restricted diet, that's fine for the days you're at home and you're kind of lounging about, or you're at work or something, you're not really working hard. The days that you're out hiking is a day and I'm not saying eat silly or eat poorly. eat smart. But these are days you need those calories. You need to burn that. There are days when I've gone out and felt like crap. Then I realized I might have skipped breakfast. Always a terrible idea. Or I had a smaller breakfast than normal. Again, a bad idea when you're going to exert yourself. You need those calories. You need that food. Eat smart. This is not the day to buy like four Hershey bars and have them on the way up there.
Yeah.
One's okay for a little bit of energy, but obviously it's not. We're talking about healthy stuff, fruits, and things like that. Fruits, and I like chicken salad and stuff like that. Things that, I shouldn't say chicken salad. I make my chicken salad with mustard instead of mayo, so it doesn't go bad.
Oh, okay.
But anything like that is this kind of stuff to be eating. And I'm not a nutritionist, so take this mostly as just anecdotal stuff. But it's not the day to take a pocket full of Kit Kat bars. As wonderful as they may be, this is not what we're talking about, eating a lot of food and calories on a trip. Eat smart. Fruits and vegetables are the big things you want to carry with you up there. So that's the scoop on altitude sickness. And I really appreciate the person who wrote us asking about this.
Yeah,
It was a great question. And people who are visiting here. And I'll put a link to this WebMD article in the show notes so people can go back and refer to it. I know we went through it kind of quick. There's actually a lot of information here. And I skipped over a few things that were kind of big fancy 25-cent words I don't understand. So don't make this that. One other thing I want to talk about, there's a thing coming here in the Pikes Peak region called the Outdoor Pikes Peak Initiative. And this is a thing that's being run by the Pikes Peak Outdoor Recreation Alliance. I'm a member of their advisory council. And this is going to be an opportunity over a week in January in the El Paso and Teller County area. So from Colorado Springs to Woodland Park to Divide to Cripple Creek, where we will be, and I think actually in Canyon City, so Fremont County is included in this too. There's going to be some in Fremont County. Canyon City and Florence, Colorado Springs, Cripple Creek, Woodland Park, a couple things here in Colorado Springs. Basically, this is going to be what we call listening sessions, where we want to hear from people who recreate in the outdoors about what they see as deficiencies, and also what they like, what the different land managers, we're talking federal, state, local land managers, are doing right, and what they think needs to be done a little better. So there's going to be these sessions. I will have a link to this, and if anybody's listening, it's outdoorpikespeakinitiative.org, and there's a schedule on there. Every one of these sessions, and they go from Monday the 23rd to Saturday the 28th, runs from 5 to 6:30 p.m. as an in-person session, and then they will have virtual sessions each night on Zoom from 7 to 8 o'clock. So if you can't make it to these places, you could also have the option to do it. I will be one of the people helping facilitate this on Woodland Park on the 25th, and then there's one in Colorado Springs on the 28th. That's at Library 21C, the new library the city, the library district open. And I will have a link to this. If you get my newsletter, you actually got this information in the newsletter, but I will have a link to it in the show notes. But it's outdoorpikespeakinitiative.org is where you can find the information on it. This is really a good chance for people to, really get the ear of the various land managers and find out, and tell them what you want to see, what you want to see happen with outdoor recreation here in the Pikes Peak region. So it's a pretty exciting thing, and a really, really great opportunity. So I encourage anybody who's interested, either attend in person or you can attend virtually, which I think is also great that you can do that. And that's coming up here at the end later on in this month. Kevin, there's one last thing I wanted to bring up. On next Monday, Martin Luther King Day is also a free day for National Park Service sites. So any National Park Service, National Park, Monument, the various other sites they have, if they charge an admission fee, they will be waived on next Monday, which is also a federal holiday, so a lot of people will be off.
Cool.
So it's your chance to go to a national park or National Park Service site for free on Monday. So take advantage of that while you can, too. So that's always a good day. That's going to be Monday the 16th is your chance to do that. So check that out, too. And, Kevin, I think that's all we had on the agenda. We got a lot of stuff covered today.
Yeah.
We really covered quite a bit of stuff. Do you have anything else you want to bring up? Have you done any hikes? You had a chance to do any hiking lately?
Yeah, just in a Cheyenne Canyon and Red Rock Canyon. And I did convince the manager of my team to go on a hike for a team building thing at the end of January. So I'm really excited to do that, to get paid and hike at the same time.
Nothing could possibly go wrong.
Yeah. Like, look at that cliff over there.
I've been waiting for that promotion.
Exactly. Just kidding, Steven. But
no, he's not.
But I'm doing a few more hikes with more testing of the Apple Watch Ultra and comparing it with my Garmin. But so far they seem to be very, very, very close.
Cool. I forgot to ask you about that. Yeah, but keep us in the loop on how that's going. So you're wearing both of them.
Yeah.
When you're out there. Cool. Yeah, I'd like to know how that works out. And they may end up, using the same chipset or something in there for the GPS part. But it's good to know. I mean, it's good to know how well those are working for you. So far they seem to be pretty identical. You get the same readings. And
cause the hike I did on Sunday was Red Rock Canyon open space, and that was a big loop that I did. And the Apple said 5.66 miles, and the Garmin said 5.63 miles. So it's
really close.
It's very close. Yeah.
And that could be the position on your wrist.
Yeah.
To make a little bit of a difference. That's good though. That's good to know they're not close. It's not like one saying 5.63, another saying 2.
Yeah.
Which would be a terrible thing if they were off by that much. I think that's all we got for today, Kevin. I want to thank everybody for listening. Thank you for being here again.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. And don't forget, people, if the listeners out there, if you'd like to support this podcast, you can do it at Patreon, patreon.com/hikingbob. And you could, contribute. We're still working on the variable options for donation. But there's all kinds of rewards you can get depending on your level. Look through that at that website. If you see something, a level you'd like to, but the reward for that isn't something you can use, then let me know and I will work hard to find an adequate and appropriate substitute for you. I'll be happy to work with people. We really appreciate those who are members. They do help pay the bills to put this podcast on. So really, really appreciate those folks who do that. And thank you all. Thank everybody for listening to the podcast. And I think, Kevin, with that, I think we'll say goodbye.
We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast.
Before you go, did you know you can rate and review our Studio 809 podcasts? That will help us because our egos really need to have thousands and thousands of listeners. But that helps our wonderful sponsors reach more ears too. And we do love our sponsors. So just go to Studio 809 or any individual 809 podcast in your iTunes or podcast app and click on ratings and reviews. Thanks.